You've definitely heard the phrase, the prodigal son returns, right? It's usually for that person who comes back home after being away for a long time, maybe not doing so great. But what's the actual story behind that famous saying? Well, in this explainer, we are going to unpack one of the most powerful and influential tales ever told.
So let's get right into it and answer that question. Because, the story isn't just about the son who took off. It's just as much about everyone who stayed behind.
Here's how we're going to break it all down. First up, we'll dive into the family drama itself. Then we'll explore what it all really means. After that, we'll track its kind of shocking influence on everything from Rembrandt to the Rolling Stones. We'll even look at a fascinatingly similar story from the Buddhist Lotus Sutra. And finally, we'll get to the heart of it, why this ancient parable still hits so close to home for so many of us.
Okay, let's dive in. So this whole story is told by Jesus in the Gospel of Luke, and the context is pretty important. He's just been criticized for, welcoming and eating with people who were considered sinners. So he tells this story as the last of 3 parables all about loss and redemption.
The story kicks off with, a man had 2 sons. Now, for the people listening back then, this was like a classic story setup. It would have immediately made them think of other famous brothers like Cain and Abel or Jacob and Esau. So right from the get-go, you're kind of primed for a story about rivalry. So the younger son does something pretty outrageous. He asks for his inheritance while his dad is still alive. This was basically like saying, "Dad, I wish you were dead." And he gets it. He takes the cash, leaves town, and just blows it all on what the text calls reckless living. Of course, he ends up completely broke and starving during a famine. He hits absolute rock bottom, taking this super degrading job feeding pigs, and he's so hungry he's actually jealous of their food. It's right there in that moment of total desperation that he finally comes to his senses.
This is the speech he practices on his way home. See, he's not expecting a welcome party. He knows he's messed up, big time. The absolute best he's hoping for is to be treated like a hired hand. He's totally prepared to just work to earn his keep with zero expectation of grace.
But that is not what happens. The father, who it seems has been watching the horizon, waiting, sees him coming from a long way off and runs to him. He doesn't even let his son finish that whole apology speech before he's yelling for the best robe, a ring for his finger, and ordering the fatted calf to be prepared for a massive party. The welcome is immediate, it's over the top, and it's completely unconditional. But wait, the story isn't over. Because as the party gets started, one really important person isn't celebrating at all. The older brother. And honestly, his reaction is where the parable's deeper meaning really clicks into place. What we have here are 2 totally different mindsets clashing. The younger son gets it. He's lost, and he needs mercy. But the older son, the one who stayed and did everything by the book, he is furious. He doesn't see his brother's return through the lens of love, but through the lens of law and merit and what's fair. He feels like his years of loyalty have just been completely ignored. And this is the father's response to his older son's anger. It's really the punchline of the entire parable. For the father, this isn't about who earned what. It's about redemption. The son who was lost to him, who was as good as dead, has come back to life. This was Jesus' direct answer to his critics, the ones who couldn't believe he would welcome sinners. So, across different Christian traditions, the Father is almost always seen as a symbol for God. His actions, well, they aren't about fairness in the way we humans think about it. They represent a kind of divine love that's boundless, that's joyful, and that's given as a total gift, not as some kind of earned wage. It's a really radical picture of grace. Now, the power of this story just could not be contained on the pages of Scripture. It basically exploded into the wider culture, and it's been inspiring artists for centuries.
I mean, it was an incredibly popular subject for art. Back in the medieval period, it was one of only a handful of parables that you'd consistently see depicted. And later on, you had Northern Renaissance artists like Albrecht Dürer creating these famous gritty engravings of the sun at his absolute lowest point, living with the pigs. This just goes to show how personally artists connected with this story. Take Rembrandt. He was obsessed with it. He painted that famous tender scene of the son's return. But earlier in his life, he also painted a self-portrait of himself as the prodigal son, living it up in a tavern with his wife. The story was clearly a mirror for his own life, his own losses, and his own search for grace. But here's the thing. This isn't just some ancient high art theme. The story's core ideas,
leaving home, messing everything up, and that deep down hope of coming back are so universal that they show up in the most unexpected musical corners.
Just look at this list. It's wild. The Rolling Stones did this bluesy cover of a traditional gospel song about it. Heavy metal legends Iron Maiden wrote their own version. The reggae band Steel Pulse reimagined it as a Rastafarian parable. It even gets a shout-out in the middle of a classic 90s hip-hop track by House of Pain. The themes are just that flexible and that powerful.
Okay, but maybe one of the most fascinating echoes of this story is found halfway around the world in a totally different religious tradition, Mahayana Buddhism. The famous Lotus Sutra has a very similar parable, but with a profoundly different message. So, in the Buddhist version, the son also leaves and ends up poor. But here, the father finds him, and the son is so intimidated by his father's wealth and power that he doesn't even recognize him and runs away. So, instead of a big party right away, the father comes up with this incredible long-term plan. He hires his own son for a dirty, menial job, and then, over decades, he slowly promotes him, getting him used to responsibility and wealth. It's only on his deathbed that the father finally reveals to everyone that this trusted manager is actually his long-lost son and heir. This slow, patient method is called skillful means. It's a way of teaching that's tailored to what the student can handle. So the meaning here isn't about forgiveness, it's about the idea that everyone has an inherent Buddha nature, even if we can't see it in ourselves.
Wow. So we've looked at the story, its meaning, its huge artistic legacy, and even its surprising parallels. But that brings us all the way back to the main question. Why? Why has this one story resonated so deeply for 2,000 years?
First off, let's finally define that word. Prodigal just means wastefully extravagant. And yeah, it perfectly describes what the son did with his inheritance. But kind of ironically, you could also use that exact same word to describe the father's love, couldn't you? It's also extravagant, reckless, and given out freely.
But the real staying power of this story is that it's not just about one guy. Actually, it often gets other names, like the parable of the two brothers or the parable of the forgiving father. And that's because it's really a story about three distinct universal roles that we can all probably see in ourselves.
Think about it. There's the younger son, that's the part of us that messes up, gets lost, and desperately needs a second chance. Then there's the older son, the part of us that plays by the rules, works hard, and feels that sting of resentment when grace seems unfair to someone else. And finally, there's the father, the part of us that's called to love unconditionally. The theologian Henry Newitt once wrote that in his own life he had been all three, the rebellious son, the resentful brother, and finally, he hoped, the loving father.
And really, that's the ultimate question the parable leaves us with. It holds up a mirror and asks us to find ourselves somewhere in this family. Are you the one who needs forgiveness, the one who struggles to give it, or the one who offers it freely? The amazing thing is, at different times in our lives, we're probably all three.